The life and ministry of the late Reverend William Branham has had a profound effect on multitudes of people around the world, and one of those people is my guest today, Reverend Sidney Jackson from Durban, South Africa. Now, I believe, Brother Jackson, that you were an eyewitness to many of the miracles and things which took place during those meetings, and you attended several of the services, the massive meetings which took place in that country. But just before we get to the actual interview and the account of those services, I would like to ask you a few questions about yourself so that the people would be a little bit acquainted with you.
Yeah.
Were you born in South Africa?
Yes, I was born in 1900.
1900, so it doesn't take too much mathematics to calculate. You're 77 then.
That's easy.
Yes, and how many years have you been in the ministry?
By God's grace, 25 years.
25 years.
As a missionary.
As a missionary.
Yes.
What countries other than South Africa were you ministering in?
First naturally was South Africa. From there I went up to Rhodesia, and then today what they call Zambia.
Zambia. Yes.
I've also been over in Mozambique. But I've been over to the States. I think this is about the 12th time. I've been over to Holland, Germany, and Britain, Venezuela, down South America.
Good part of the world. What other languages? I understand that you do speak some of the native languages as well.
Yes. I'm naturally English descent, but I speak English, Netherlands, Afrikaans, and I can speak the Shangaan and Sotho, mixed up also with Zulu. These languages I qualified in.
Right. What years was it that Brother Branham visited South Africa in which these large meetings took place? I know he was there more than once, but the first time?
Well, the first time he came was with campaigns. The second time he didn't come, he just passed through to Mozambique.
Oh, yes.
But I remember, well, I think it was the 4th October 1951. The first meetings were held in Johannesburg, which naturally is the biggest city in the Republic.
Well, Johannesburg has a population of about 5 million, does it not?
Yes, something like that.
And then the meetings were conducted actually in various of the larger centers.
Yes, most of the big cities and towns, they'd worked out an itinerary, and he would travel from one place to another.
Yes.
And I think the whole duration of the campaign was about 9 weeks.
9 weeks of meetings?
Yes, and he hardly had any rest. They just kept him going all the time.
Well, that must have been a grueling experience.
Yes, it was terrific, yes.
Yes. Well, I want to have you relate some of the things which you've seen, and I appreciate that a lot of our viewers are not going to have had the opportunity to see the things which you've seen, but I think it will be extremely interesting for them to be able to see and hear an eyewitness account of some of the things that took place in those meetings. I wonder if you could just relate some of them, but first, before we get to the actual things which took place, how large were some of the services?
Well, commencing in Johannesburg, which naturally was an enclosure, and it was the actual camping grounds of the Apostolic Faith Mission, who is the greatest Pentecostal group in our country.
That was the auditorium that they used?
Yes, well, I wouldn't classify it as that. It was mainly under a shelter.
Yes.
If you allow me a moment, they purchased the old Johannesburg railway station building, and it was just, why I want to mention this because this is important, and it was just on this huge steel structure, and it could accommodate anything up to 10,000.
Yes.
And then naturally the last three meetings had. The last night it was estimated up to 17,000.
17,000.
Yes, well that's where the gathering was.
And then some of them in Durban were even much larger.
Well, the Durban, we'll go to that. That was on the Greyville racetrack.
I see.
But over in Johannesburg, it was sponsored by a national committee made up of the various Pentecostal groups.
I see. You actually attended first the meetings in
Yes, in
Johannesburg.
Johannesburg,
Mhm.
yes.
Uh-huh.
Well, we stayed away from where Johannesburg was about 300 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And when these advertisements had gone out about Brother Branham coming to South Africa, was something so remarkable. As we read in the scriptures, we read there that the power of God was present to heal.
Yes.
And it might seem almost mysterious or unbelievable, but folk who'd never been even to the meeting and just heard about this little man. He was of stature, I would put him down about 5 foot 6, 7, about my height.
Mm-hmm.
And coming down to the meetings, God just seemed to electrify the whole country. And even in the bus shelters and trains and traveling down in cars. And this is the truth and facts, that children start screaming and start taking off their leg irons.
While they were
yes,
in bus shelters?
en route to the meetings.
On their way to the services?
Not even having attended a meeting before.
My.
It was just miraculous how God visited our country.
And that seemed to blanket the entire city during
Well,
those services.
I could only put it down as a visitation from God.
Yes.
And God's compassion towards us.
Yes, yes. You've related certain of the instances which took place. You were speaking to me of one man who I believe his doctor said he wouldn't even make it to the meeting. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Brother Ed, I will touch on that if you would just allow me a bit yet to get more or less what I have in mind, and don't think the time will run out. But the night Brother Branham came onto the platform, the huge crowd was already there. And I want to mention around about 4 o'clock in the meeting, before the meetings, people were already accommodated there.
What time was the meeting to start?
Yes, well, it was at 7:30.
And at 4 o'clock
yes,
we were already
yes.
gathering?
And then he had meetings around about 4 o'clock, which Brother Baxter and them would preach. But he actually came on the platform at about 7:30.
Yes.
And these folk were there. And the night Brother Branham came onto the platform, hat in hand in his Bible, and as he stood there and just spoke, and he said, "Good evening, friends." And then they had a healing line, which was by way of card, and then just anyone could call it random.
Mm-hmm.
Would have a healing line. There were about 100. But I don't think in any of the meetings, the actual folk that came by card, allocated to come onto the platform, were about 5 or 6.
They would only deal with 5 or 6?
Yes, it would about that. And then you see these 2 gifts given to him. The one was to discern the thoughts, the intents of the hearts of the people.
Yes.
And he would just tell you your name, where you came from. And if you were in an accident, he would tell you precisely how the accident was, your disease and everything.
I mean, he was calling the people right out of the
Yes,
audience?
yes. He would pray for the first 5 or 6 and then tell them their diseases. And instances there where I saw a man walk upon the platform. When he came walking up, said, "Your name is so-and-so, and you came from Durban." And he says, "Your foot is so many inches short," and the man came like that. He says, "Turn around, walk out, God's healed you."
My.
And I happened to see that man's shoulders, and as he came and was walking, when he walked straight with his shoulders balanced and walked out.
Instantly and miraculously healed.
Instantly his foot lengthened. Well, those are instances where folk had come onto the platform. And I remember one man whom I knew well. He'd had cancer all over his body and on his head. And when the evening before he was in the meeting, when Brother Branham prayed that mass prayer, these cancers start falling and dropping off his head. But he still had a card. And as he come up, Brother Branham said to him, "You've had cancer, you're healed, just walk on."
Is that right?
Now,
were the cancers types of growths?
yes, there were growths on his head, big scabs, they fell off. And he had a cancer here, and they'd endeavored to graft on, and it was unsuccessful. And I know the man, and you could see his ribs. And by the third, fourth day, it had healed up, and it was about the size of a match head on this man. He stayed about 30 miles from where I stayed.
This was a man you personally knew?
Yes, this man. And he attended the first night, but on account of him having a ticket, he still insisted to come up. I suppose there was that desire. And then Brother Branham said, "You had cancer, we still come walking, you had cancer, you were healed last night, turn and go." Now, there were instances like that, but which was to me very, miraculous and absolutely so inspiring was when Brother Branham stood there speaking to the people, and then he'd say, "Now, you realize there's a presence here." And then he would say, he says, "Now in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, I take every man and every spirit